Hey there, everyone. Mr. Lewis here, ready to go through section 3.2 of Unit 3 in AP Human Geography with you here today. And section 3.2 is pop culture. So remember, Unit 3 is all about culture, specifically folk and pop culture. And within that, we're looking at, because it's so broad of a topic, we are focusing on specifically what we call material traits of culture, things that are visible, things that we can actually see, and things that we experience ourselves. So when we talk about pop culture today, we're going to be looking at things like what we eat, what we drink, the clothing that we wear, the things that we do in our free time, the places that we live, the architecture of the places that we live. So there's a lot of things that when you walk outside, even just walking outside of your home or looking around your home, you can see tons of elements of popular culture. Folk culture is a little bit different, and we kind of have to dig a little bit deeper to analyze all the folk culture that's around us or within our communities or around the world. But pop culture is a little bit easier to pick up on, and I bet a lot of the things that you're going to see today you can relate really closely to. So let's take a look. Okay, section 3.2, elements of popular culture. Let's take a look. First of all, clothing. So we're going to look at a few different elements here: clothing, food, architecture. The first one up is clothing. And when you look at clothing in pop culture, it usually reflects a couple things. Things such as income, our occupation, our taste, and what's in vogue or what's trendy at that time. Whereas remember in folk culture, it would typically be determined by the resources that are available and the natural environment, right? It's more based on need than it is want or what's cool and trendy and hip. But in pop culture, it usually comes down to those things. It's occupation, what you do for a living. It's how much money you make. It's things like what the latest trend is. So it's more about, as you could guess, what is popular or what is expected of you from your social status. So, for example, a lawyer is expected to have a certain attire, and people are, in some cases, literally putting their lives in the hands of lawyers, and so a certain professionalism is expected there, right? So you often see a lot of suits, a lot of ties or scarves or blouses or very professional things, whereas, say, a factory worker, it's much more acceptable to be wearing like jeans, which are very durable, right? And a work shirt. If you went in and had a lawyer who was just wearing jeans and a polo, even if they were very nice jeans and a nice polo, it would be a little off-putting for not just the client, but probably the judge as well. It wouldn't be as accepted as it would be elsewhere, right? Even in a school, if a teacher came in wearing jeans, which we're not supposed to other than Fridays, that would still be much more acceptable than a lawyer who showed up in court wearing jeans. So things are different in different contexts, right? It's all about the specific culture of that occupation or that workplace in that case. Women's clothing in popular culture tends to change a lot faster. We've seen men's trends and fashion start to really change quite a bit as that's become more of a focus for men in pop culture, specifically American popular culture over the last decade or two. But women's popular culture, clothing, has typically been the one to push fashion trends and to really try new things and start new fashion trends that cause people to want to keep up with those trends, right? So you can see at the bottom here, a lot of people in popular culture spend a lot of money, and especially if they do have that extra money, to keep their wardrobe stocked even on a annual or semi-annual basis, right? Where they're constantly buying the new things that are going to keep them in the fresh, new, hip look, right? And so that's very important to people in social circles in popular culture, especially in places like the United States, where they're keeping up with the latest trends and brands and things like that. And as we'll see in the next section with folk culture, it's very different. So some other things about pop culture and clothing. a lot of people, like we said, it really comes down to that cultural tradition, right? So jeans, again, are a great example of pop culture bleeding into clothing. So jeans were something that started in the United States but spread all around the world. So you could be dropped into any part of the world, and if you saw someone wearing jeans, you probably wouldn't be that surprised, but you might be surprised to hear that some places really don't see jeans as acceptable, and it would be culturally inappropriate. But even consumers in two places who buy the same brand of jeans, same exact pair of jeans, might wear them in different contexts, right? So again, if you were a surgeon, you're probably not going to show up to open heart surgery wearing your favorite pair of Levi's. That would be in that particular context unacceptable for most people. Although you might not think that's that big of a deal, other people might be rubbed the wrong way. And to take that to a more extreme level, some people wearing jeans in particular cultural contexts, that would be seen as it says at the bottom, very bold, right? Maybe even very controversial. So although jeans have spread around the world and are a great example of pop culture catching on in the form of clothing, some places it's actually forbidden to wear jeans or just taboo, right? It is culturally unacceptable to be wearing jeans in that particular context. So let's move on to food, right? So we've got our jeans on, now we're hungry and we're going to get some food. And you could go to pretty much any city, even a lot of small towns, and the two products you see on your right here, McDonald's and Coca-Cola, chances are you could find those products anywhere in terms of big cities. And even as we get into small cities and towns, it's a pretty good chance you're going to be able to find a McDonald's. If you can't find a McDonald's, you can probably get your hands on a Coca-Cola product. They are all around us, and this leads to what we call a uniform landscape, right? Any big city, you can look around and see McDonald's and Starbucks and a Burger King and a Dunkin' Donuts. And so these are really common. That's what makes them popular. That's what makes them part of pop culture. So some pop culture preferences for food, though, are influenced by what region we live in, right? So New York versus Chicago pizza versus Detroit pizza versus West Coast pizza, whatever it might be. It's a great example of how our regional taste can influence popular culture within the context of food. And another great example is soft drinks. So as you look at the preference for Coke versus Pepsi around the world, it's kind of interesting. So this is percent market share held by the leading soft drink, and Pepsi would be in blue, and then light blue and purple, whereas Coke would be in red or orange. So you can look around the world, and even just North America, Canada prefers Pepsi seemingly, whereas the United States prefers Coke, and then Mexico really prefers Coca-Cola, and you gotta love that Mexican Coca-Cola using that cane sugar. Ooh, that's good stuff. And then as you go down into, South America, you can see that like in Brazil, Coca-Cola is by far the leader. But if you go just west of Brazil, okay, you can see that now we're getting into Pepsi territory. So it's all around the world. It's different. Saudi Arabia, big Pepsi fans, right? You go up into Russia, big Coca-Cola fans. So these are regional differences in taste for just soft drinks. But it also gives you an example, an idea, I should say, of the extent of our popular culture, that companies like Coca-Cola and Pepsi are the leading soft drink in all of these different countries that are filled in with any color on this map, right? That's the extent of our popular culture just in the context of soda, what we drink. So we talked about clothing, we've talked about food and drink. Let's talk about housing. We've had an interesting development over the last 50 to 70 years in housing, where since the middle of the 20th century, or right after World War II, so World War II ended in 1945, About then up through today, we've seen a lot of distinct popular culture influences in housing in the United States. And sometimes you see some really, really cool, like artistic designs, but we're going to focus more on regional distinctiveness. So unfortunately, over time, this has kind of gone away, right? We now start to see these really big, massive construction projects where neighborhoods are put up in a matter of months. But a lot of the houses look very similar, right? They're nice, they're very beautiful homes, but they're not all that unique compared to, say, the houses right next to them. They're very, very similar. And that hasn't always been the case. After World War II, a lot of houses were built in this modern style, and you're going to see a few of those different styles. But since the 1960s, we've seen this neo-eclectic kind of style that's come to dominate. But it used to be here's the main takeaway. It used to be where housing was a lot more distinctive. It was very unique, and today we're seeing less of that. But here's what we see on the East Coast as people started to settle, right? As the colonies were settled, and then people started to move westward into the Midwest and the South and all of that good stuff. We see these distinct patterns of housing taking over. So as you start from the Northeast and move actually through our neck of the woods over to northern Ohio, northern Indiana, up into Michigan, Illinois, Chicago is right here, right up into Wisconsin. We tend to see a lot of this New England style. Whereas the middle Atlantic, so getting into Pennsylvania, down into Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky area, we tend to see this style of home. It's known as the I house, right? It's kind of straight up and down. So you've got two floors there, very very standard. Whereas the New England, there's a big central hall in the home, and again, these are found primarily throughout the Great Lakes region. And then finally, down in the bottom here, you've got the lower Chesapeake and Tidewater architectural style, which had this really, really steep roof on it, and then chimneys on both sides. So as you look around the country, as you start driving around and exploring all these different areas, you can actually start to see these differences. We were just driving through Ohio, my wife and I, and we could see a lot of these two types here, New England and Middle Atlantic. So we drove out to Virginia, and on the way out there, we were following this green line here. And I'll tell you what, we saw a lot of homes that looked just like this New England style. Whereas on the way back, we were actually driving through southern Ohio, and we saw a lot of these I houses, as they're called, where it was just sort of two simple stories stacked on top of one another, and you could see those very distinct differences from just northern Ohio to southern Ohio. So start keeping an eye out for that type of architecture as you travel around the state and other parts of the country. These probably look very similar to you. So this is what we call a Tudor-style house. These are very popular in Chicago, and were very popular in Chicago around the 1970s. So as all these suburbs built up around Chicagoland in the 1970s up through today, we saw a lot of, and still see, because the houses are still standing, a lot of this style with these very noticeable A-frames, as they call them, in the front here, right, with the windows, and just beautiful. We see a lot of that out in New York City suburbs as well. So you tend to see some of these styles that caught on for a little while, and of course, even if it was popular just for a couple years, chances are those homes are still around today. So you can see some really cool designs, sometimes some goofy designs that were popular and maybe aren't so popular now, but those houses are still around. Now, let's get into music. Two more things here. We got the fun part now, right? We kind of went through the needs, housing, clothing, food, all of that stuff. Now we're looking at, what do we do with our leisure time? What do we do with recreational time? And one of those big things is music. And music isn't just about leisure, right? Music has been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Humans have always developed ways to create music, and it stands for a lot of different things. In folk culture, it tends to represent some kind of rite of passage, or maybe it tells a story of the area's history, or a family history, or a cultural history, or it could be tied to religion. Whereas in popular culture, it's all about the money and the entertainment. So when we look at music in pop culture, you have specific individuals or groups who write these songs, right? Record them or perform them on stage with the goal of making money. It's not just about passing on traditions and rites of passage and religious songs. It's about a career. And so the big difference is that in pop culture, you can make a job out of this stuff. And we've seen pop music really around for a little over 100 years now. It came around during the turn of the century, late 1800s, early 1900s. And there were different clusters of music that started to develop. So you can see down south here, Austin is a big music scene, LA, San Francisco, Vancouver, big music scene. Up near New York and the Northeast, up into Canada here, some really, really big scenes there as well. Chicago, up into Madison, Wisconsin. But the biggest one of all is Nashville. Nashville is the place people go, not just to be country music stars, but all kinds of pop music. So it's really about getting yourself out there, right? And they call this agglomeration. We're going to talk about that later on. Basically, you have all these people who are interested in the same industry, all really moving to the same place and living and working and collaborating in Nashville. So, of course, there's going to be so much talent in a place like that. You're going to have recording studios, you're going to have managers, you're going to have producers, all of these people and skills that can really keep that industry going and find new talent constantly to give us all the wonderful music that we want to hear on the radio and in person and on iTunes or whatever it might be. But Nashville is a huge, huge hotbed of musical talent and has been for a while. And as you look around the country, it's interesting. Musical taste is very different as you go from region to region, and pop culture diffuses in different contexts and at different paces. So as you look around the country, in blue, these are the areas. So this is most watched YouTube artist between 2016 and 2017. 21 Pilots is dominating out west, whereas if you look in the south and really to the east here as well, it's Rihanna. But then you have these pockets too in southern Nevada and Southern California, where Justin Bieber is the hot name there. So music is very regionally distinctive, and sometimes it takes a while for one region to even find out about an artist before others do. And so 21 Pilots has now become very, very popular in the Midwest, but they were more popular out west to begin with. So finally we get to sports. And sports are something that, again, are in folk cultures, right? Sports have been around for centuries. That's why we've had the Olympics around for centuries as well. But in pop culture, sports take on a very different sort of feel. It's not just about playing for honor or whatever it might be in folk culture, right? A rite of passage, things like that. In popular culture, it's more about the money, right? It's a spectator sport. And so we have all of these huge organizations, the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, the NHL, MLS, that are known globally. And there are European professional sports organizations that we know here, right? Soccer teams being a big example, like the Manchester United or whatever it might be. So in popular cultures, sports aren't just about the community. It's not just about a tradition or a rite of passage, and it's not even just for fun. it's a very serious business and it makes a lot of money. So you can also look at, and this is where it gets really interesting, how popular sports have become regionally distinctive, and you can trace that back to usually some kind of diffusion. So, like you in the UK, cricket and rugby are very popular, but also in places that the British Empire extended their reach to throughout the last couple hundred years, these former colonies that were once controlled by the British Empire, guess what? Cricket and rugby became very popular there as well. So as you look in India, which was colonized by the British Empire, cricket is very popular. Rugby is very popular. Australia, which again was controlled by the British Empire. Both of these, especially rugby, are very, very popular. New Zealand, rugby is the sport. So are they super popular here? No, not really. Rugby is kind of catching on, right? Through diffusion. It takes some time, but you can trace back the popularity of these sports in these countries to the United Kingdom spreading their wings and expanding their empire back in the day. And then you look at baseball. So we were at war with Japan in World War II, right? But after that, we established very, very close relationships between the United States and Japan. And as we diffused to one another more and more, baseball became very, very popular in Japan. Arguably the most popular sport now in Japan. And we've actually had some players who started in Japan come over to the United States and have been very successful. The U.S. East Coast, lacrosse is very, very popular. So you look at some particular areas, the East Coast being one of them, but it's also pretty popular in the Midwest. Lacrosse was actually a Native American sport. It was once played by the Iroquois, and so over time, this sport was shared, and it kind of went from being a folk culture sport to a popular culture sport. Lacrosse is now a scholarship sport at colleges. It's a professional league. So there are all kinds of examples of how lacrosse has gone from being folk culture to popular culture, just like we saw cricket and rugby do from Great Britain to all of the countries that they have colonized over the years. So it's kind of interesting to look around. You can see the regional aspects of sports and who our favorite teams are, and it's no secret, of course, the favorite teams are usually going to be located in that region, right? But it's funny to see the extent of that. So you look at the Atlanta Braves. So these are Major League Baseball teams, and Atlanta is where this red dot is, where the Braves are, and you can see the extent to which Braves fans are all around not just Georgia, but into Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, right? And then like over here, the Colorado Rockies. So everyone up in this state above Colorado are big Rockies fans. Well, this is Wyoming. Wyoming doesn't have a professional baseball team. So it makes sense that they would pick up on one of the closer teams, right? The Colorado Rockies, who play right out of Denver. So it's kind of interesting to see how far that extent goes. Minnesota is another one. The Twins are located in Minneapolis, way over here. But because North and South Dakota don't have their own professional baseball teams, they're mostly Twins fans. And even over into eastern Montana here, you've got a lot of Twins fans as well. So sports are something that regionally we kind of feud about, in a usually a fun way, but sometimes people can take it way too far. So there's a couple interesting videos here if you're interested. One of these, and I'm not going to play them now, but you can certainly watch them on your own. They are really interesting. There's no assignments to go with them. The first one is called Senegalese lamb wrestling. So Senegal is a country in Africa, and they have this form of wrestling that is called lamb wrestling, but as you can see, it's not spelled like a lamb, the animal. It's Laamb. So it's a totally different style of wrestling. Even if you know what wrestling looks like here in the United States, it's very unique. And what's cool about it, even though there are some pop culture aspects, there are some lamb wrestlers in Senegal who have made it into a professional career and have become very wealthy on it, There are also a lot of aspects of folk culture, such as the traditions or the practices that take place before the match even starts. As you'll see if you watch the video, those are all very much built into folk culture. Things like painting your body, painting your face before the match, or going through all of these processes that are really tied to that local culture, right? And that's where you see some of the aspects of folk culture shine through. All right, that's it for section 3.2. No assignments to go with those videos. That's just purely there for your interest. So if you watch one of them or both of them, enjoy. But there are no questions to go with that, no activity, no assignments and buzz. You just have a wonderful weekend, and thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next week.